Hello, everybody. This is Peter Deegan from RSSL, and this is another in our series of podcasts. Today, we're actually talking about good distribution practice, but auditing in GDP environments. I'm delighted to have with me the course tutors for our GDP auditor program, Neil Wayman and David Abraham. Neil, hi, and maybe you could give yourself an introduction about your background in GDP.
Hi, Peter. Yes, and it's great to be talking to you today. Background, I've been a QP and an RP for a major pharmaceutical company. So I've got experience of kind of both sides of the fence, but I've done a lot in the GDP arena. I actually was involved with the original Cogent Gold Standard when it was first drafted. So got involved when the MHRA was really trying to set the standards for RPs and really getting more involved with GDP as an area. And I follow that through now. So I run the RP forum for RSSL, and I also run the Pharmaceutical Quality Group RP forum, which we've had successful in the last 4 years. So very active at the moment with GDP, and there's lots of interest in how the standards are being raised and how the bar is being raised by the regulators around what the RP is responsible for. So I think this is a good build. So thank you for inviting me today.
Thank you, Neil and David.
Yes, good afternoon to you, Peter. Yeah, it's great to be talking again with yourself. My background, obviously, in working with RSSL currently at the moment, running a Cogent course. I'm also running the lead auditor course for RSSL, which for pharmaceuticals. But more interestingly, that actually working with the likes of BSI, SEN, and ISO on guidelines and standards for supply chain, which I think is very much, in keeping with the theme today, and also running with the ECA. Like Neil, I run the Cogent Gold Standard course for RSSL, and I'm also running the one-day GDP course for RSSL. So yeah, great. So look forward to the rest of the conversation.
Yes, and just to complete the trio, I'm Peter Deegan. I'm the lead course tutor for our IRCA certified GMP and supply chain lead audit courses. But also as well, I'm pulling together an audit career path in different areas. So with David and Neil, I've been leading the course development for our auditing courses. We talk a lot about auditing in GMP. We've IRCA certified GMP lead auditor courses. But what about GDP? Is there a need for auditing in GDP? What's the requirements for auditing? What are the regulators' expectations? And what's the experience in the GDP environment to conduct audits?
Really, I think we're seeing an upsurge, I would say. I think an awakening maybe of by RPs about responsibilities around audit. I mean, with the RP responsibility, it talks about self-inspection. It doesn't specifically refer to audit per se, but as we know, we work in a very diverse supply chain, and particularly with the particular outsourcing of particular activities, whether that's transportation or storage, etc., which could be two typical ones. Then there's a need to have clearly competent auditors, competent staff who can go out and audit those particular facilities on behalf of the license holder. And I think RPs are seeing that they obviously need to possess that skill. And we're seeing increasing sort of questions about, what standards do I use? I mean, because as you quite rightly said, GMP auditor training is everywhere, but GDP auditor training is not specifically covered at the moment. So I think there's a real need to give that offering to RPs. I think RPs are looking to see how they can get that sort of training, because clearly there is an expectation, I would say, from the regulator. Well, there's already an expectation that if you are auditing, you are trained to be an auditor. So I don't think if any RP was thinking of going out and doing an actual audit, that they should be doing that without thinking about having some specific training, because I think the first question an agency inspector would say is, okay, who did this audit? Are they trained? So there really is a need to meet a real, I think, a demand and a need to provide something in this space.
Yeah, I'd echo that, and I think certainly want to talk about regulatory as one of the criteria expectation if you're going to be an RPI is have an auditing skill, and that's definitely out there with the MHRA and across Europe. And I actually, probably like yourselves in the forums that you run, I see people saying to me, David, where do I start in auditing? I do this auditing, I come on this course for the coding course, or being understanding more about GDP, but where do I start, and what type of audits are there? Because in this environment, since COVID times, we're looking at different types of audits now. So you got to your face-to-face audit, which is our standard audit process. And then we've got hybrids. Then we've got web-based audits as well. And sometimes there's a mixture of each of those type of activities. And it's interesting that how people approach audits. How do they write an audit report? How do they go about first starting to plan an audit, to participate in an audit? So these are the questions that I'm always getting when I'm running some of the courses and also attending some of the forums. So I think, is there a requirement for skills and knowledge and understanding of how to carry out effective audits in a GDP environment? I think yes, definitely there is, because we're not looking at manufacturing. We're looking at warehouses. You're looking at transport suppliers. You could be looking at a freight forwarder, and each one of these have a different take, different process. Are their procedures exactly the same? Are their processes exactly the same as you would see in the manufacturing and under GMP? Not always, and sometimes it always says depends. And one of the things I do get asked, because I'm on 4 licenses currently at the moment as an RP and RPI, and one of the leading questions by regulators is, what is the business model, and what are you selling, and what does your supply chain look like, and how do you ensure each one of your supply chains are meeting your standards? So the only way to do that really effectively is go and do an assessment or an audit, and that is where whoever works in distribution would have an advantage coming on one of the topic courses like this, because they would understand from ground up how to plan, how to execute an audit, and actually how to follow up.
Neil, you've conducted many a GDP audit, and you've probably had responsible persons that you've audited. What's your experience of the GDP environment, of the maturity of auditing, and where can we benefit from education, training and learning in GDP auditing?
I think the key thing for reflection is that I'm sure many RPs are used to being audited in some respects, because they'll all have received some form of regulatory inspection. So they're used to receiving audits, and they may have some limited experience of doing some level of self-inspection, because there's always a requirement to sort of show you've got some self-inspection activity going on. We've seen a bigger fragmentation of the supply chain now. We see a lot more outsourcing. There's a lot less of it all done under one roof. You've got all your own transport arrangements. You might have all your own cold storage, etc. From my perspective, when I was auditing, I think there was less pressure on the RP to do that audit, maybe because of not that such a diverse supply chain. But I think we're seeing now is that is very much changed. And I think the other aspect that has significantly changed as well through this time is the regulatory oversight that's gone into GDP is increased significantly in recent times. I never thought I would hear the day that we'd talk about RPs being interviewed before as they go onto licenses, or RPIs being interviewed as they go into licenses, to really check whether they really are competent to do the roles. So I think in that respect, the whole dynamics changed, the landscape has changed. And whilst you might have been doing a few internal self-inspections as required within the roles and responsibilities, I think now I'd be looking, certainly if I'm going in to do future audits, you'd be certainly looking to see what competency was around any audits the RP may have done externally, and do they have the necessary training and background in auditing in order to do those to a competent standard? Do they understand the standards and the standards they're audited to? And then can they effectively execute an audit? So do you know what to do in an audit, how to perform an audit, set an agenda, set that scope out, perform that audit to the required standard, and then feedback the non-conformances, and then follow up to ensure those non-conformances are closed. And that's not an easy task. It's very comfortable to do it in an internal environment, but as soon as you start to externalize that, it needs a set of skills that I think many RPs probably don't possess today.
I think our experience on the lead auditor courses, at least, and that's a 5-day program, is that at the very beginning of that course, we deliberately get the trainees to set an audit program. And they're all over the place, and it's stressful, and they don't know the standards. For David, really, we've talked a lot about the risk assessment that needs to be done as part of an audit. How is this course going to help potential delegates on our courses improve their audit program planning and conduct a better risk assessment to get the best out of them?
I think what this course will do and what the courses will deliver is that risk-based approach. We talk about supply chain, which even today we talk globalization, global supply chains, and you may have multiple suppliers within that supply chain. So it's about the planning, the risk assessing the suppliers you have on board, and actually, do you need to go and audit them every single year? Is it every 2 years? Do you need to go and audit them at all? So adopting that risk-based approach in terms of the planning and preparation, that's one of the key things we want to obviously deliver from this type of course. And without that good risk-based approach and that planning approach, then that is the 80% of the work in terms of an audit, because you have a good risk assessment, good risk planning, who you're going to audit, what standards you're going to audit against, and then what is their background, where are they located, can you do it remote, are you going to do it face to face, what's their risk factor to the supply chain affecting your products and services you're being delivered through your supply chain, and then from there you can go and execute it. And the other one is the follow-up of that process. So that's what we intend to deliver, a good knowledge-based foundation for going out and giving you confidence when you're going to speak into your supply chain or your suppliers within your supply chain.
I think the other thing as well, David, I think that what we've seen is that not only are our regulators looking for that risk-based approach to your external audit program, but they're also looking for it on your internal audit program and self-inspection. Not expecting a list of areas of your QMS that you're auditing randomly. They want to sort of look at, well, what are the sort of key signals you're seeing from management review, which identifying areas that might need to be part of your self-inspection program the following year. So again, this course can build that sort of skill set in and give you that sort of application that you can take that not only to your external program but to your internal program and really demonstrate that risk management is embedded in your quality system around all your auditing and self-inspection activities.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about external audit and supply chain, but yeah, you're right, Neil. There's the internal audits as well that are happening within your organisations, the wholesale dealers. It could well be that you're looking at that process, and somebody just carry out internal audits. They don't go and do external audits. Will this type of course help them? Yes, it will, because it will deliver you with the same skill set, the same mindset to which to deliver a good internal audit. Again, looking at the regulators as well. One of the good questions that have come up: how do you conduct your internal audits? What approach have you taken? And are you just adopting a checklist approach? And I've seen a lot of these checklist approach. I think of the old days, the auditors in the white coats walking around the factory with a clipboard. 5750. Have you got this? Yes. Tick. Have you got that one? Yep. Tick. Those days are gone. We need to look at the far and wide across your organisations. If you're just looking at, say, someone in the warehouse just picking and packing, what are they doing? Have they been trained? Are these procedures applicable to them? What's their background? How were they onboarded? So there's lots of activities that go on, and again, it comes back to the planning. So yeah, internal audits just as well as external as well.
There's a strong value proposition of achieving a really cohesive audit program, whether that's an internal audit program or your supplier audit program or a mix of the two. When you get an experienced auditor coming in or an inspector, they will ask to see your audit program. And essentially what those auditors are trying to do is say, do you know the pinch points in your business? Do you know the higher risk areas in your business? How are you mitigating that? And how are you ensuring that you've got objective evidence, as they call it, that you are in compliance, that you are mitigating and managing those? I, as an auditor, look at an audit program. I know within 30 seconds whether a company knows its business or not, knows where its issues are, because its audit program is targeting those areas to look further and deeper. And it builds in risk assessment, it builds in understanding the standards, it builds in what's their business processes, and it builds in what's the quality management system that's helping them. And so therefore that audit program and being trained as an auditor gives you a different way of looking at the world. So coming back to the actual course itself, we've built this from the ground up. Other courses, as you said, Neil, auditing courses cover GMP, but they don't cover GDP. Our case studies are real world GDP case studies, because GMP can be more complex, but we try and help our delegates understand and practice real world scenarios.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the things, obviously, that we do deliver, we always deliver on the course, is actually bring knowledge. We talk about training, which is fantastic, but it's the knowledge that will underpin the skills to go out and audit. And as part of that, we're looking at auditing techniques, how to ask questions, how to utilize the senses to the maximum degree. How does audit competencies, what skills do they actually need to be an auditor? It's not just about going out and asking a load of questions. It's about understanding the process, how to reflect that back. And that's what we'll also teach you through the exercises that we do as well. So how to use checklists, how to write non-conformities, and how to reflect that back to the criteria, which is your standard. And, from a self-inspection point of view, internal as well as external, we've got to think the quality management systems. And this is one of the key areas for regulatory bodies, is year on year, the biggest area is quality management system, where they're raising the non-conformities. And as part of that is about compliance, about how you not just, is the quality management system working, is it applicable to your organization? Is it applicable to external organizations within the supply chain? And actually, how does it project that improvement? How can you interrogate your system to say, is it working? Can it work better? And that is one of the things for auditing. It's about challenging it, looking for the continuous improvement of your systems.
What we find on our IRCA courses is at the end of the week, the delegates are very easily able to write meaningful reports, non-conformances and conformances. We found through feedback that the auditees are much better able to respond to a clear non-conformance that's not woolly. It's got the absolute standard, it's got the absolute observation, and therefore they know how to correct it. And that helps mutually, both auditor and auditee, because it's a mutually beneficial partnership. I think that's the learning journey that we want to put in our auditing courses, to de-stress you, to give clarity, to help the auditee understand what's going on. Quite often I've experienced and read audit reports which are woolly, that they're not clear, they are ambiguous, they may be confusing. So it gives that auditor credibility, particularly in an area where you may not be experienced auditor, to be able to refine that language and use that language. And David and I, we are conducting a series of podcasts interviewing former attendees on our courses to say, how's it benefited you? And I interviewed somebody the other day and they said, when I said, how's it benefited you? They said, your stories and your experiences, Peter, are so valuable because it's helped me understand what I mustn't do in the future and what I should do. So we try and pay it forward, don't we, David, a lot, and Neil? We're delighted to be able to pass on our experience for the next generation of auditors.
Absolutely. And I think it's always good. It's great to learn the process, of generating an audit agenda and performing an audit, the mechanics of it. But there's nothing really beats having, obviously, the experience to overlay that, which we can help with. And that hopefully gives some confidence to the candidates when they do go out, by learning about things that we've done well, maybe things that we haven't done so well either, the mistakes that we've made. I like to echo your thing around the non-conformance piece. I mean, the poorly written non-conformance, poorly communicated non-conformance, poorly understood, usually ends up with a no response, or a response that doesn't meet the requirements that you originally set because it's not been understood in the first place. What that means, it never gets closed, and what that means is the regulator comes in and says, how many non-conformances you got opening from your audits, and you say X or Y, and it's and then you've got another conversation to have. So there's an importance in getting it right, because at the end of the day, you want to show that you've had the appropriate response and it's closed out, and everybody agrees that is no longer an issue. So yeah, we can bring some context to that. I think we've seen all the badly written ones. We've sat in audits where we've struggled to articulate maybe sometimes even the standard, or maybe even exactly what the non-conformance is, and it's an awkward moment, which really you don't want to have. I'm sure every auditor that goes through this training will have it. We can overlay some experience about maybe how to get out of those positions, and maybe how to learn from our mistakes.
Yeah, all our auditing courses, we use like non-conformities through a fair approach, adopting, some factual. Is it accurate? Is it incontestable? And can you actually go and retrieve it again? Can you replicate that? So it's having those 4 key components that are put in it. And actually, I've just a couple of weeks ago completed a remote audit with a wholesale dealer, and as part of that process, identified there was 3 recommendations, but I still used a fair approach into communicating those back to the auditee, and I was pleased to say that none of them were contested. They're all accepted, even down to non-availability of a temperature mapping report in line with their procedures. So so again, it's having the confidence to deliver that, and if you adopt that type of approach, then you're going to get not just good results, but also you're going to have actions that get actioned and not just left on the sideline.
That brings into, I suppose, my final comment, that untrained people doing a task are generally highly stressed in doing that task. And I absolutely, when I started as an auditor, you make it up as you go along almost. You try your best, but being trained de-stresses you. And one of our delegates said, I've got to do audits as part of my role. I didn't know how to do audits. And I've even got the confidence to walk through the door of the meeting room and sit down and say to the auditee, good morning, my name is Peter, I'm the auditor. I'm going to start my audit now, and you're confident to be able to do that. And you're showing a position of authority, of competence, and highly professional work ethic. And that engenders the auditee to want to work with you more. And I think I can't say more highly than that of all our delegates who go through our courses. I think really get that experience coming out and are confident to be an auditor.
Yeah, I think if also flip it as well, which would be an interesting one to if you're reflecting as an RP, if you're being audited, you are the auditee.
Mm-hmm.
If you are a trained auditor, you know what good looks like.
Yeah.
You know what a good agenda looks like. You know what a trained auditor it looks like, because you'll see reflected in them what you learn from this type of course. You'll be able to see the sort of lack of open, the open questions. You'll be able to see non-conformances with clear reference back to the standard. So it'll enable you to have be better as an auditee in some respect as well, and know whether you're being effectively audited, as well as be an auditor to a much better standard.
I think it's very insightful. I can only recall an experience where I went to, I think I was in Helsinki doing an audit, and clearly the company were competent auditor trained, and they were almost preemptive for my questions because they knew the structure of the day. It was a mutually beneficial audit. Yes, there were still non-conformances, but they wanted to improve as well. And that was just a very pleasurable experience to know that there was a like-minded auditee who understood why I was there and understood the value of why I was there. And I think that's really important.
Absolutely.
Look, guys, thank you very much for sharing your experiences in GDP. We're delighted to be able to provide a unique GDP auditor course built from the ground up for responsible persons, for professionals working in GDP to really help make a difference in the pharmaceutical supply chain, which benefits our patients, and that's why we're in it at the end of the day. If you want to know more about our GDP Auditor course, go to the RSSL website, look under the Training and Consultancy tab and the Auditing tab, and our dates for the GDP Auditor courses are clearly displayed. And also as well, if you want to know more, by all means contact RSSL, go on the chat line on the website itself, and an expert can come back and talk to you. If you want us to train your team internally, that's what we can also do, rather than just alone the public courses. What we benefit from is if there's a team of auditors, they've all been trained in the same way and they all speak the same language, and that's even better improvement. David and Neil, thank you very much for your time today. We'll sign off here, and we hope everybody's enjoyed listening to that podcast and our insights on GDP and auditing.
Thank you very much indeed, Peter.
Yeah, thank you, Peter.